My baby, forgive me. Mama has nothing left to give you. I have searched for food and begged for help, but the world turned its back on us. I can't watch you starve in my arms anymore. Maybe someone with a kinder heart will find you and give you the life I couldn't. Please don't hate me when you grow up, if you ever do. I just have to let you go so you can live. Mama loves you so much. Goodbye, my love. The cries of a newborn echoed through the small but neat maternity ward of the district hospital. The pale morning light streamed in through the curtain, bathing the room in a soft glow. On the bed lay Amara, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, but shining with the joy of a new mother. She clutched her tiny baby girl against her chest, rocking her gently, whispering little words of love into her fragile ears. Beside her stood Adebayo, her husband, tall and smiling so broadly that his dimples refused to hide. His hands trembled slightly as he reached out to stroke his daughter's cheeks. "My daughter, my princess," he whispered, tears brimming in his eyes. On the other side of the bed sat Madame Bola, Amara's mother. She clapped her hands and raised her voice in thanksgiving. "God has done it again! My daughter, you have brought joy to this family. Adibio, my son, you are blessed. This child will bring light and peace into your home." The room was filled with laughter, relief, and the fragrance of fresh life. Nurses walked in and out, congratulating the couple. Their faces softened with smiles. As Adebayo bent to kiss his wife's forehead, he suddenly remembered something that made his chest swell with even more joy. He straightened, cleared his throat, and announced, "Amara, Mama, I just received good news this morning. My father has finally recovered. After months of sickness, the doctors said he is strong again. He even said he will come for our baby's christening. Imagine, he will hold his granddaughter with his own hands." The words landed like golden bells in the air. Adebayo's father had been down with stroke for over a year and couldn't even attend his son's wedding. But he gave his blessings. Hearing that he was strong enough to move around was great news to the family. Amara's heart swelled. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer of thanks. Her world felt complete. Her baby in her arms, her loving husband by her side, her mother's support behind her, and now the promise of her father-in-law's presence at the christening. But little did she know that the day would turn out to be her worst nightmare ever. 3 days later, Amara was discharged, and they returned home. Madame Bola moved in, taking the role of a second mother, rocking the baby at night, cooking pots of pepper soup, and making sure Amara was pampered with hot baths and warm food. On the 6th day, preparation for the christening began. The compound buzzed with excitement as women in colourful wrappers gathered to prepare food. The men set up canopies, while children ran around singing. Inside, Amara dressed her baby in a tiny lace gown, smiling at the thought of her daughter's first official outing. Adebayo came in, his face bright with excitement. He whispered, "Tomorrow, everyone will gather to see our princess. My father will come. It will be a day to remember." The stage was set, the joy unstoppable, the christening awaited. Yet, unknown to them, a secret lay quietly, waiting for the right moment to explode. The compound was alive with colours the next morning, all set for the ceremony to begin. At the centre of the compound stood the decorated table, with the local pastor already holding his Bible, ready to begin the christening. Guests settled into their seats, murmuring in anticipation. Then, The iron gate creaked open, and in drove a sleek black car, polished to brilliance. From the back seat emerged a man in his late 60s, tall but leaning heavily on a wooden staff for balance. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the compound like someone searching for long-lost shadows. It was Chief Adebayo's father. His body had grown frail from months of illness, but his presence still commanded respect. His daughter, Tolani, a confident young woman in her mid-20s, stepped out from the driver's seat and quickly rushed to steady him. The crowd erupted in greetings. Chief Adisa smiled politely, nodded, and lifted his staff slightly in acknowledgement. He was ushered to a seat among the guests. Few minutes later, Madame Bola and Amara stepped out, with Madame Bola carrying the newborn and smiling gently. The moment Chief Adisa's eyes fell on Madame Bola, his breath caught. The staff in his hand trembled slightly. He leaned back in his chair, forcing his features to remain calm. The ceremony began. The pastor prayed over the baby, sprinkling water lightly and declaring her name, Janet. Applause followed. Drums rolled again. Women ululated in high-pitched voices, and guests threw money into the air in celebration. But even as the ceremony went on, Chief Adisa's eyes never left Madame Bola. His mind was racing, chasing fragments of the past. He was seeing Madame Bola for the very first time since her daughter married Adebayo. Back then, a date had been fixed for the introduction, but just before the ceremony, he fell gravely ill. Unable to attend, he had asked his kinsman to accompany Adebayo in his stead, and they fulfilled the duty faithfully. So, he didn't get to meet his in-laws formally before the wedding. His sickness lingered, keeping him bedridden for months. Even when the wedding came, he could not be present, though he had sent his blessings with a heavy heart. Now, seated at his granddaughter's christening, looking directly at Madame Bola, his world began to crumble. A cold wave swept through him as memories he had buried clawed their way back. His staff trembled in his grip, his eyes fixed on her face. Deep within, he whispered a desperate prayer. "Let it not be true. Let what I think not be what it is." By the time the christening ended, food and laughter filled the air, but Chief Adisa's heart was unsettled. Later, after the guests had eaten and the compound grew quieter, Adibio ushered his father and sister into the living room. Madame Bola, Amara, and the baby followed soon after. Chief Adisa leaned forward on his staff, his eyes fixed on Madame Bola. "My in-law," he began gently, "this is a day of joy. God has blessed us with a child and kept me alive to witness it. Oh yes, glory to God for that," Madame Bola replied quickly, smiling. The silence that followed was thick. Finally, Chief Adisa cleared his throat. "Tell me, Madame Bola," he said slowly, "do you have other children, apart from Amara?" Madame Bola stiffened. Her lips tightened before she forced out a chuckle. "Other children?" "No, Chief. Amara is my only child. God blessed me with just her." Chief Adisa's eyes darkened. He leaned closer, his voice calm but probing. "Are you sure about that?" Tell me the truth, Bola. You and I, we have known life. We have walked roads that others know nothing about. So, I ask again, are you sure she is your only child? The air grew tense. Amara, confused, glanced between them, sensing an undertone she could not yet grasp. "I said she is my only child," Madame Bola repeated. her voice firmer now, though her fingers twisted the edge of her wrapper nervously. Chief Adiz's lips curved in a thin smile. He tapped his staff against the tiled floor softly, then asked in a voice that made the room freeze. "Madam Bola, do you remember Iroko Forest in Oyo Town?" Madam Bola's face drained of colour instantly. Her hands trembled. She swallowed hard, unable to hide the fear that had suddenly risen like a ghost from the past. The room went silent, as though the walls themselves were waiting for her answer. Madam Bola sighed. "My past has finally caught up with me," she began slowly. "I never thought this day would come, when I would be forced to peel back the wounds of my past, to speak of things I had buried so deeply that even I sometimes pretended they never happened. But here I am, with my heart trembling inside my chest, confessing the shame and pain I carried for over 3 decades. It all began when I was barely 17, in my final year at the secondary school. I was young, naive. I had a boyfriend. His name was Coyote. He was my classmate. I loved him, and I thought he loved me too. I was living with my uncle because my parents died when I was very young, and my uncle took me in. He was a stern man, one who believed a girl's only value was her obedience and purity. During our final exams in secondary school, I became pregnant for Coyote. When I told him, expecting comfort, his face hardened instead. His words cut me like sharp blades. "Bola, it cannot be mine. I have my life ahead of me. Don't tie me down with this." I cried. I begged him. But his ears were shut, and his heart was far away. Immediately after our exams, he left the village for the city, chasing dreams I was no longer a part of. From there, he travelled abroad. And just like that, I lost him forever. I was alone. When my uncle found out about my pregnancy, the shame was too much for him to bear. He didn't care that I was young, scared, and had nowhere to go. He threw me out of his house, like a piece of worthless rag. His words still ring in my ears. "You shameless girl! You want to disgrace me? Not under my roof. Carry your shame and go, with no parents to run to, no family willing to take me in." I wandered aimlessly, hungry and tired. The nights were cold, and my swollen belly mocked me with every step. By God's mercy, a kind woman named Madola took me in. She was a single mother of a 10-year-old boy, with a small old bungalow in Oyo, the neighbouring village. She gave me food, a mat to sleep on, and a roof over my head. It was in her care that I gave birth to my child, a baby boy. I still remember the night he came, wailing into the world with tiny fists clenched, as though ready to fight for a life I could not give him. I named him Akin. For a short while, I thought maybe I could manage. Maybe I could raise him with Madame Ifeoma's help. But life is never that kind. Just 3 months later, Mama Ifeoma fell ill. Within weeks, she died, leaving me stranded once again. Her relatives came, claimed the house, took her child, and threw me out. I carried my baby in my arms and walked the streets for days with no destination. The little coins I had on me were not enough. Some nights, I had to choose between buying food for myself or a small portion of pap for my baby. Most nights, neither of us ate. I was drowning, so I made up my mind to leave my baby somewhere, hoping that he is picked up by a kind person, maybe a wealthy trader passing through, or a woman who longed for a child who would take good care of him. I couldn't bear to see him suffer like that. So, very early one morning, I found my way to Iroko Forest in Oyo town. I had wandered there, my legs moving without direction, my heart heavy as stone. The trees loomed above me, ancient and silent, as if they were witnesses to my torment. I looked down at my baby, his fragile chest rising and falling. He was so innocent, so undeserving of the suffering that life had thrust upon him. Tears blurred my vision. I kissed his forehead and dropped him gently along the tiny path. Then I turned and ran. I didn't look back. Every step away from him felt like I was ripping my soul apart. But I told myself it was for the best. I told myself someone would find him. That night, I lay on the cold ground in another part of the town, my body shaking with sobs. I pressed my empty arms against my chest, haunted by the memory of his tiny fingers. Days turned to weeks. Weeks turned to months. I never returned to the forest. I couldn't bear it. I tried to bury the memory, to live as though it never happened. But the truth followed me like a shadow. 30 years have passed since that day, but the weight never left me. I carried the shame in silence, never telling a soul. Not even my late husband and father of my daughter, Amara, knew this story. I lied to my uncle that I lost the baby at birth when I eventually returned home to him, years after, to introduce my husband to him. And now, here I stand, confessing the secret of my youth, the sin that has haunted me like a curse. The child I left at the foot of the Iroko tree. Whether he lived or died, I never knew. But I have always feared that one day the truth would return to find me, Madame Bola concluded, crying uncontrollably. The silence that followed was deafening. After a while, Chief Adisa leaned forward on his staff and asked in a low, deliberate voice, "When you left that forest, did you meet anyone on your way out?" Madame Bola's eyes flickered nervously. She swallowed hard, her fingers twisting at the edge of her wrapper. "Yes," she whispered. "I passed a man, but I didn't look at him properly. I couldn't. I was crying too much." Chief Adisa closed his eyes for a moment, his chest tightening as memories surged back like a flood breaking through a dam. Slowly, he opened them again and uttered the words that would change everything. "Madame Bola, I was that man. My mother was terribly sick on that day, her body burning with fever that no herbal mixture could calm. I had heard from an elder that some rare herbs grew inside the Iroko forest, and so I went there, desperate to save her. On my way in, I met a young woman. She was hurrying out, her eyes swollen with tears, her head bent low. I remember greeting her, but she didn't look at me. She brushed past, her shoulders shaking as though the weight of the world sat on her back. I thought nothing of it then. I told myself she had her own troubles, just as I had mine. But minutes later, when I went deeper into the forest, I heard the unmistakable cry of a baby. A weak, pitiful wail that cut through the silence of the forest. I froze. At first, I thought it was a trick of my mind. But then the cry came again, sharper, more desperate. I followed the sound, and there, under the great Iroko, I saw a tiny child wrapped in a worn cloth, his fists punching the air as though begging for help. My breath caught in my throat. I looked around, but there was no one. No mother, no father, no soul. And then it struck me. The crying woman I had passed, she was the mother. She had left this innocent child behind. I stood there for a long time, staring at that helpless child. My thoughts battled within me. I was only a young man then, barely finding my footing in life. My mother was sick. I had no wife, no home of my own. How could I raise a child? But the moment I bent down and lifted him into my arms, I knew I could not leave him there. His crying stopped the instant I held him close, as though he knew he had been saved. Something inside me shifted that day. That child became my responsibility. I carried him home. My mother, despite her illness, burst into tears when she saw him. "God has sent us a blessing in the middle of our sorrow," she said. From that moment, she forgot her own pain and devoted herself to nursing him. By some miracle, as she cared for the baby, her own health began to return. She grew stronger each day, and together we raised the boy as our own. I named him Adebayo. He grew under my roof, never lacking food, never knowing the cold rejection of the world. As the years passed, I moved to the city in search of better work. I could not leave him behind, so I took him with me. I worked odd jobs, carried loads, and did everything I could until finally, fortune smiled on me. I secured a good job, one that allowed me to provide for him like a true father. Later, I married, and my wife bore me a daughter, Ngozi. She grew up knowing Adebayo as her elder brother. To her, there was no difference, no question. And to the world, I was his father. Even my own wife never knew the truth. She assumed he was my son from a previous relationship, and I allowed her to believe it. I never told Adebayo. How could I? What would it have done to him to know that he was abandoned in the forest, left to die like an unwanted burden? I chose instead to give him a new story. A story of love, of belonging, of family. He grew into a man I am proud of. Strong, responsible, kind-hearted. He has carried my name with dignity. But the truth never left me. It lived inside me like a quiet fire, waiting. And now, here we are. He looked at Madame Bola as he finished speaking, his heart heavy. "That boy you left under the Iroko tree, Bola. The child you thought you would never see again. Here he is." "Adebayo," Chief Adisa concluded. The words hung in the air, unshakable, unchangeable. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the shallow sound of Madame Bola's sobs. But when Chief Adisa's words fell, I was that man, her entire world shattered. Her eyes widened in disbelief, her body trembling as though the earth itself had shifted beneath her feet. A guttural cry escaped her lips, sharper and more painful than before. Tears poured freely down her cheeks as she covered her face with both hands, her voice rising in broken fragments. "No, no, no, God! This cannot be! This cannot be!" Her weeping grew louder, echoing through the walls of the house. Then, in a sudden burst of strength, she staggered to her feet and walked straight toward Adebayo, who stood frozen in shock. She bent down, her fingers fumbling with his trouser leg. With trembling hands, she rolled it up from his toe to just below his knee. There it was, a faint but unmistakable birthmark, the very one she remembered pressing her lips against on the day she left him under the Iroko tree. Her body stiffened. Her eyes widened as though staring at a ghost. A piercing cry tore from her throat. "My son! My blood!" Before anyone could stop her, her legs buckled. She collapsed heavily onto the tiled floor, her body limp, her eyes rolling back. "Mummy!" Amara screamed. Chaos erupted instantly. Tolani rushed forward, trying to lift her, while Chief Adisa shouted for help. Adebayo's driver sprang from outside and ran in. Together with Amara, they carried Madame Bola out to the car. Amara sobbed uncontrollably as she climbed into the back seat with the unconscious woman cradled against her lap. The driver sped off toward the hospital, his horn blaring as he forced his way through the evening traffic. But Adebayo remained behind, standing in the living room, his legs shaking, tears streaming down his face. He clutched his head with both hands, his voice breaking into a cry that came from the depths of his soul. All these years, all my life, and you never told me? He turned to his father, his voice hoarse with anguish. Papa, why didn't you tell me about my history? Why didn't you let me know who I was? My whole life has been a lie all along, and I didn't know. Chief Adisa leaned heavily on his staff, his own eyes red with tears. My son, forgive me. I didn't want you to feel different. I wanted you to grow up like every other child. I wanted you to believe you belonged. I thought I was protecting you. Adebayo shook his head violently, his chest heaving. But you weren't protecting me. You destroyed me. His cry broke into loud sobs as he sank into a chair, his whole body quaking. Then, in the midst of the anguish, a sharp cry pierced the room, the baby's cry. Tiny and desperate, the sound pulled at Adebayo's heart like claws. With trembling hands, he picked up the infant from her crib, pressing her against his chest. His tears fell freely on the baby's soft cheeks. What kind of curse is this? He whispered, his voice shaking. How do I even face tomorrow? Ngozi, her own face pale with shock, touched his shoulder gently. Brother, let's go. We must get to the hospital. Amara will need the baby to feed. Together, the four of them, Adebayo carrying the crying infant, Chief Adisa leaning on his staff, and Talani walking silently beside them, made their way into Ngozi's car. The air was thick with grief, every breath heavy with sorrow. By the time they arrived at the hospital, dusk had settled over the town. The sky was streaked with orange and fading blue, the streetlights flickering awake. They hurried into the waiting area, where Amara sat hunched on a chair, her eyes swollen from crying, her face blank with shock. Adebayo walked up to her slowly, carrying the baby toward her. Amara, he whispered, his voice cracking. Please, our child is hungry. She needs you. But Amara did not even look at him. Her eyes were distant, hollow, as though she was staring into an abyss only she could see. Then, slowly, she stood up, and without a word, without touching the baby, she turned and began to walk away. Amara! Adebayo called, panic in his voice. Please, wait! But she didn't wait. She broke into a run. Her wrapper gathered in her hands as she fled through the hospital corridor, her sobs filling the air. She pushed past nurses and patients, through the swinging doors, and into the darkening street. It was late evening, almost nightfall. The shadows swallowed her as she kept running, crying loudly, her voice carrying her pain into the night. Amara! Adebayo cried again, running a few steps after her but stopping as the baby's wails grew louder in his arms. He stood frozen, torn between chasing his wife and holding his child. His knees buckled, and he let out a loud, broken scream into the air. Amara, meanwhile, ran on, unaware of where her feet carried her, unsure of where she was going. All she knew was that she had to get away from the truth that had shattered her life in one cruel evening. And so she ran into the night, her cries mixing with the wind, her heart breaking with every step. Now the big question is, what should happen next? Should Adebayo and Amara stay together and raise their child despite this painful revelation? Or should they part ways to end what many would call an abomination? Tell us what you think in the comments. The story continues. Watch out for part 2. It's going to be even more emotional and dramatic.